So welcome to this session this afternoon, From the Grand to the Garage, what hotels can teach automotive retail about performance. With more than 30 years in senior hotel management roles, Andrew Mosley has led multi-million turnover landmark properties, including the Belfry and the Grand Brighton, where he firmly established the locations as first choice destinations. Now an executive coach and mentor, Andrew brings an external industry perspective to our Automotive Management Live audience. Focusing on performance over results is key to sustainable progress. Drawing on his leadership mantra of people, delivery and sales, Andrew's strategic keynote and Q&A will explore how prioritising behaviours, culture and consistent standards delivers long-term results, stronger teams and greater customer loyalty across competitive service industries. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Mosley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much for coming. It's really nice to see you all. As Tim said, I'm going to talk a little bit about how hospitality, high-end hospitality, can perhaps help other industries, and in this case the automotive retail sector, to improve customer service, delivery, sales, and focus on their people. I was 14 years old when this photo was taken. I've always been a people person. There I am, just in case you didn't pick me out. I've always been a people person. I've always enjoyed being part of a team. If you put me in the golf team, I'd rather play 4-ball, better ball, if that means something to you all. Table tennis, always in the doubles team. And in the football team, and when it came to sports like football, I loved playing in a team. Interestingly, I was so proud to be selected for this football team at school. This was the second 11 at school. To the eagle-eyed amongst you, you'll see there are actually 16 of us in that photo, so it wasn't quite a second 11, it was more a second 16, but I still felt that very much that I had been selected. What was interesting is, generally speaking, the first 11 was the under 16 team, and the second 11 was the under 15 team, and in my year group there were, yes you guessed it, 16 of us, so you pretty much got automatically selected into the team. However, I was still massively proud to be part of the team. Perhaps more seminally, it was at 14 years old that I decided I wanted to be a hotel general manager. It was the emotional feel that I experienced when I went into a hospitality environment that really drove me to want to lead a team within hotels and hospitality. As I said, just 14 years old. Whenever I was allowed to, I would excuse myself from the family table and want to go on a wander around hotels, digging behind the scenes, poking my nose into areas I shouldn't have been looking into, steam rooms, saunas, swimming pools, bedrooms, corridors, kitchens. I went everywhere just because I was so passionate and felt this emotion about the feel of a hotel. 14 years after that photo was taken, I was appointed to my first general manager's position, leading a team of about 80 people at a hotel in Cumbria actually, which at the time, back in the early 90s, was turning over about 4 million. So these days, on a like-for-like, about an £8 million business. Perhaps more importantly, 40 years later, I was leading a team of 300 people at the iconic Grand Hotel in Brighton, which some of you may know, some of you may have stayed in. And by the way, the Q&A is, can I get a refund for my awful stay in 2013, please? Because that's not what I'm here for today. But I was proud to be in that football team, but my word, I was proud to lead the team at the Grand, and indeed any team that I led during my growth to senior general manager within the hotel industry. And this photo was actually taken on the 160th anniversary of the hotel being built last year. In the next 20 minutes or 30 minutes or so, I'm going to talk to you about how changing your management agenda, I think, can enhance your business. I want you to start focusing more on performance than results. I want to look at the customer journey and how there are some synergies, but possibly a little fork in the road between hospitality and automotive retail. And I'm going to stress the importance to you, if you haven't got one or two, of having a breakthrough goal, both in business and your personal lives, because I've thrived on having those in mine. So, in my opinion, there are two alternatives to running your management agenda. And I won't embarrass all of you by asking for a show of hands, but I will probably spot it if you look downward, almost ashamedly, realizing that it's agenda number 1 that you tend to run to rather than agenda 2. So let's have a look first at agenda number 1. I think this is the corporate way of running your management agenda. And it probably starts with a review of the profit and loss account, probably made worse by the fact that the meeting timing is probably driven by the issuing of the profit and loss account. That moment in the month when you just can't wait for the profit and loss to be issued, and immediately follows that is your management meeting, or in some cases an emergency management meeting. Having looked at the profit and loss and probably felt totally depressed by the reading you've just done, it's time to then try and buoy yourself with a little look at a forecast and talk yourself into some more positive news. And then, as a result of realizing the forecast isn't looking that great either, talk about the business issues with your team, normally the problems rather than the opportunities. And then you run out of time because you've spent so much time talking about the profit and loss, the forecast and the business issues, you don't get round to what I consider to be the really important agenda items. Just having a look, see if anyone's now looking downwards. No, you're all looking at the screen still. Very positive stuff, team. Thank you very much. Option 2 is what I describe as a more free-spirited and enterprising way. And by the way, I once told this same story to a finance director of a corporate that I was working for in a hotel, and I saw him visibly roll his eyes when I suggested that this should be the way to run the management meeting. So it's not easy to make this happen, but I definitely think this is the better way of doing things. Start by talking about your people. Start by talking about how they are, how they need developing, who's doing brilliantly, how you are appraising them and rewarding them and praising them. Are there any vacancies that are causing them undue stress because they're having to do the work of 2 people? How satisfied are they in their role? So have you done a recent survey of your staff to ask them whether they're happy working for you or the organisation you own or not? Move on then to talk about your customers. And again, what are you doing that's really good for them? What could you improve on? When was the last time you asked them whether or not they were happy with the product and service that you were providing? And then talk about sales and marketing activity and how that can provide and hopefully stimulate some business growth. Before looking at some investment, not only just in your physical surroundings and your buildings or whatever it might be, but also your people, your customers, your sales and marketing, and so on. And then look at the impact that that might have on your forecast and your finances. Because I'm not being daft here, and I'm not being too euphoric about the whole thing. I know how tough it is across every industry at the moment, so there is a need still to look at the forecast and the finances, but I think it should come at the final end of a management agenda rather than right at the front. And a little takeaway for you perhaps from today as a result of this: just give it a go. And if you're uncomfortable with giving it a go, or you're not necessarily the boss that should be giving it a go, encourage your boss and say to your boss, how do you fancy me running the next management meeting? I've got a new agenda for you, and see whether or not it makes a difference. In a few minutes' time, I'm going to prove to you it definitely does. In 2019, strangely enough, exactly 40 years, almost to the day, on my 54th birthday, so 40 years after the school football photo, we won as a team at the Grand Hotel a Katie. And a Katie in hospitality is the accolade. It's the BAFTA of our industry. And we won it for Best Employer in Hospitality. It's just a single property at the time. The Grand was independently owned, and we won against Marriott and Red Carnation and Hilton and all sorts of other massive brands. the best employer in hospitality. And there are some Katies on the right, and there's my fantastic HR director with me on the top left. There's my senior leadership team with the Katie, but trust me, there were many celebrations with that wider team of 300 as a result of what we achieved. And you may be sitting there thinking, so what, well done, sounds like a good night out on your birthday. But actually what it then led to, because we had been so focused on our people to achieve this award in 2019, was some really amazing things in our business. We had employee satisfaction, engagement, call it what you will, of over 95%. In other words, 95% of our team would recommend us as a place to work and were saying that they were happy working for us. We had retention of 75% measured as a percentage of the 300 people that work for us with more than 1 year's service. Now, some of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with hospitality and the struggles and woes it has always faced in terms of staff retention. So keeping staff for more than a year is actually no mean feat in itself, but keeping 3/4 of your staff at all times more than 1 year is a really good achievement. And if you drill down into the numbers a bit further, we actually had about 50% of our team with more than 3 years service and 15 to 20% of our team with more than 10 years service. So people were really engaged and committed and connected to our business. And what that meant was lower recruitment costs, so an impact to the profit and loss account. Lower training costs, great impact to the profit and loss account because we weren't always training new people. But culturally, it meant that the consistency was there, and customers, in your case, people buying cars or coming back for a service or whatever it might be, recognized the same people every time they came back in, to our case, the hotel. And we were doing events like the Labour Party conference at the Grand. So they were coming back every 2 years. And when you've got 50% retention with 3 years service or more, then it meant that the organisers of Labour Party, for example, felt very confident in putting the event with us because they knew the team that had previously looked after them and had done a good job would do so again. And I personally, when I'm buying a car or having my car serviced or whatever it might be, feel very reassured that it's the same person, particularly on the service desk, that I speak to time and time again. His name, by the way, is Phil Ferguson at Peter Nash Cars in Warsash, just outside Southampton. And he is exceptional in terms of his customer service, but he's got very long service with Peter Nash and always picks the phone up to me and knows me by name and actually the tone of my voice, which I think is incredible. Our vacancy rate was less than 2%, so in a headcount of 300, at any one time we probably had about 5 vacancies. And again, that means that we didn't put our staff under too much stress. Our customers got the service and the product delivered to them as indeed they wanted it to. We weren't short of chefs in the kitchen, so your food definitely got cooked and all the menu items were available, etc., etc. It was a massive positive to our business that we had such engagement with our team that it led to very low vacancy rates. And what that actually also did, the whole award, the whole thing, meant that our employee value proposition was massively strengthened in the market. And this was particularly relevant to hospitality immediately post-COVID, where I'm sure all of you had pent-up demand in staying in a hotel, you hadn't been away for 18 months or whatever, and the whole world rushed into hotels and restaurants to blow their pent-up cash basically, but also just to get out of the house. And we were really short as an industry of staff to deliver on that expectation and demand from the market. But our EVP, our employee value proposition, meant that we were fully staffed when we came back from COVID, and it was all around the focus on our people and the effort that we'd put in the years prior to COVID, coinciding with the KT just the summer beforehand. And then you start to get down to some really interesting numbers that definitely impact the profit and loss account. Our competitor advantage, and come with me on this, I don't know what statistics you use in your sector, but what we do is we look at our average selling price of a room and our average occupancy, known as a combination as RevPAR, revenue per available room. And what we do to get a fair share analysis is we assume our competitor set, we've all got a 100 bedroom hotel and the average revenue per available room is X. And we were running double the market average, double our fair share, which is an almost unheard of number in our sector. So this was really, really manifesting itself on our profit and loss account, particularly in terms of the rate, which was extremely high because we were creating the demand, providing the product and service, which was driving the price. And those of you who have stayed at the Grand have probably been on the receiving end of some fairly high bedroom prices. We were running customer satisfaction scores as a result of our focus on people because of the product and the service that we were delivering of over 70% net promoter score. And again, just briefly, net promoter score, if you're not familiar with it, you ask your customers, would they recommend you? A 9 or a 10 is a promoter, a 6 or below is a detractor, and a 7 or 8 is a passive. You ignore your passives, they're there for swaying, but you take your promoters and you take the detractors away from them, and then as a percentage of the overall, that becomes your net promoter score. Look it up on Google if you're not familiar with it, it's all over the internet. Major brands and what I'd describe as globally respected hospitality giants like Starbucks are running 35–40% net promoter scores. We were running 70%, meaning, again, the impact to the P&L, for those of you who are always going to focus on those finances, were fewer customer complaints, more return custom, our fair share was way through the roof, everything adds up and makes sense. And we experienced exponential sales growth. In the time I was at the Grand, and I never say running the Grand, because I was, but I was doing it with that entire team of people. We doubled our turnover, and by the way, it's 2-digit million stuff, so it was big numbers we doubled, and with it went EBITDA, as you can imagine. Another thing that we focused on as a team, and we really switched the dial on it, is rather than focusing on results, we used to talk a lot about our performance. And basically, we would check in from time to time on ourselves and with each other on how well we felt we were performing. And there are 6 elements of performance, and what we would do is we'd look at each of those 6 elements, mark ourselves out of 10, arbitrary number, but mark ourselves out of 10. And if we weren't scoring 10 out of 10, we would ask ourselves why and how we were going to move the dial for each other or for ourselves towards 10. And technical and tactical is how well you can do the job and when you're applying those skills. Physical and mental is what positive state of body and mind are you in to do great business. And contextual and emotional are how good are your support networks and also the surroundings that you put yourself in to do great business or perform well. And I would, again, I'm going to come to some takeaways at the end of this presentation, but I would encourage you to really have a look at performance, because if you perform brilliantly, great results will ensue. The danger is you smash a target, which actually wasn't really a great target or a very tough target anyway, and think you've performed brilliantly when you haven't necessarily. Conversely, you might have a target that's been set to you that's so out of reach, you're never going to get there. And you beat yourself up by not making it, but you could have performed brilliantly in getting to 3/4 of the way there. So focus on your performance rather than your results. Feeding into your performance will be what I call your 3 C's. Your control, your confidence, and your connectedness. And again, check in from time to time on yourself and your teams to see how in control they feel of what they're doing, how confident they feel about themselves and what they're doing, and how connected they feel either to each other as a team or to your customers. It's a really, really good exercise to do, and we obsessed about it when I was at the Grand. So a little exercise there on performance rather than focusing on your results. And now we're making that management agenda really uncomfortable, because for those of you who do tend to focus on that profit and loss account, I'm now asking you to not do that, but talk about your people, and instead of talking about results, talk about performance. here we go then with the customer journey, and I'm going to try and draw some synergies between automotive retail and hotels and hospitality, quite frankly, without upsetting anyone in the room and getting kicked out of here, okay? So, I'm just the messenger and I was asked to speak this afternoon, so please come with me. I think in every customer journey there's a start point. No doubt there. And in the case of automotive and in terms of hotels, it's a buying decision, it's a consideration. It's, do I want to buy a new car? Do I want to go on a hotel break? And you sit and you contemplate it, and certainly for me in terms of both, but especially with a car, I eventually convinced myself that yes, I do need a new car as opposed to want a new car, because my view is once you need something, you're going to have it, but if you want it, you might not get it. So I determined in my own mind that I need a new car. So then some excitement kicks in. I'm really excited about this prospect of a purchase, and along I go to hopefully the first peak in my customer journey, which is the actual purchase of either the hotel room, and I'm looking at the brochures and online, or in your case, the car. And buying a car is a really exciting experience. It might not be for you, but it is for someone like me. Really, really exciting. Just going into the showroom, browsing, I can spot the car. I think that's the one over there. I can see it from a mile off. I can see it as I come down the road. There it is, it's that grey Mercedes over there. And I'm telling my partner, and she's rolling her eyes and going, whatever, because she's not that bothered about cars. But I can see it, and I'm really excited. And that experience then of buying the car is a peak or a trough, because it can go horribly wrong, as you know. But let's say it all goes well. I then have another plateau while I'm waiting to sort out the insurance, the car's being given the once over, and it'll be ready for me in a week or whatever it is. So there's a plateau. I'm thinking about it, but I've kind of forgotten about it too, because I've put it out of my mind. I know it's not until a week away. And then here comes the peak again. And now I'm getting some really, really important early impressions about whether the promise of the salesperson matches the actual delivery of the car. And in the case of a hotel, the promise of the brochure or the internet pictures matching the actual hotel room you've just checked into, because often they are very, very different things. And then I think there's this fork in the road. And as I say, I hope I'm not insulting anyone. But a hotel journey normally then continues. And as simple as it sounds, it normally involves alcohol and food and going to bed in a lovely bed and waking up and having a hot shower. And the checkout experience the next morning with a nice breakfast. In the case of automotive retail, now I've got a depreciating asset and it needs servicing. And true story. And we've already curbed the alloys, so I'm sorting that out. And I can't find the service agreements that I was promised were definitely in the post to me. And there's this login thing which I just don't get. And. And I think with my experience, and you've guessed my age now, I am 60, but with my experience over many years of buying nice cars and some real heaps as well, that is the moment where I think automotive can really switch the dial in terms of the after sales, but also particularly around the servicing. And I'm going to go back to my mate Phil Ferguson, who I'll tell you now, if I rang him now and we put him on speaker, I reckon if he picked up he'd go, "Hi Andrew, how are you?" But that's not the case everywhere. And I'm not going to tell you where I bought my most recent car from, because that wouldn't be fair on them. But I am definitely not having it serviced there, and I'm definitely not going back to buy another car. But I would buy it from Phil Ferguson at Peter Nash Cars. Unfortunately, they didn't have the car I wanted when I came to purchase my most recent car. So I think there's some thought that we can take away from that. We were constantly looking to go peak in hospitality, and not always getting it right, by the way, far from it. Whereas I think you've almost got your own battle on your hands when it comes to automotive retail, because you're going peak and peak and peak in the purchase and the acquisition of a new vehicle, it's just a great experience for most people. And then in comes massive cost and hassle, and you don't have your car for a day or two, and a tyre burst or whatever it might be. And how can you possibly step one away from the competition by changing something in those last 2 or 3 parts of the customer journey? It's a question I will leave with you. I've always been a great believer in mentoring. I really got into mentoring about 15 years or so ago now, where I was asked to participate in an unpaid mentoring program for women in hospitality. There was a colleague of mine in the industry who felt there were far too few females around board tables in our sector, which she was damn right about actually. So she created something called Fast Forward 15, specifically and sexist as it is, just for women in hospitality, and there it is, it's very niche. And she asked me if I would be part of that program, so I started mentoring on that program, saw some incredible growth in people that I was working with and their career journeys and life journeys and so on. And part of that program was about breakthrough goals. And again, if there's one thing you might go away from with today, it's ask yourself whether or not you've got a breakthrough goal for you in your own life. What is something amazing that you are going to make happen by this time next year? And what are you going to make happen that's amazing for your business, that's really, really going to help you celebrate, like a Katie, for example. Because when we sat down as a team and said, I think we should go and try and win a Katie, we all looked at each other in as much disbelief and excitement as equal measure as you can imagine. It was like, seriously? And also, seriously, can you imagine if this were to come true? Interestingly, a year ago, I decided I didn't want to work at the coalface, if you like, in hotels anymore. I was about to turn 60 and I wanted to do something differently. And so I set myself a breakthrough goal of where I would be in my personal career journey 1 year from back then. And I genuinely promise you that this has hit the spot today by being here talking to a group of people in a sector that really I have never really been directly involved in, but I've always acquired from. And so you've helped me kind of tick a breakthrough goal today, so thank you very much. But I urge you all to maybe go away from today and start to think about what that breakthrough goal might be. It's the sort of thing that if you went to speak to the Dragons about, they probably would say, that sounds amazing, but I'm out, because they would see it as too risky. So here's some homework. Should you decide you want to take anything away from today, I can urge you to scan the QR code, because what that will do is connect you to me. And for free, I will then connect with you, and you can tell me, can we do some work on the 3 C's? Can we do some work on performance? Can we talk a bit more about the management agenda? Can we talk about a breakthrough goal? And we can have half an hour or 20 minutes or so on Teams. And there is something I'm offering from today. I promise there'll be no invoice in the post, and I won't then ring you every other day with an aggressive sales call. What do you think about the car? What do you think about the mentoring? So I started up my own consultancy at the beginning of this year. This time last year I was still at the Grand. As Tim very kindly said, I'm a mentor, I'm a coach. I do a bit of public speaking. Hopefully you've given me a tick for that. And also I've got my own consultancy business, and fundamentally I specialise in the hospitality sector. But you never know where life is going to take you, and already I'm working cross sectors. I've been asked to do some stuff with the medical profession, and I'm working outside of tourism. I'm working with the corporate hospitality end of delivery into venues. So who knows, next stage might be automotive retail. I'll take questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any questions for Andrew? I've got a few prepared if you're still thinking about it, but no, not just yet. Do stick your hand up if you want to ask a question. So, Andrew.
Should we sit down?
Oh yes, let's
do.
Motor Retail's challenge around customer retention is you buy the car, you used to go in for an oil change, a service kind of within 12 months, but now actually service intervals are extended, and the challenge for the business now is to keep in contact with the customer and keep relevant to the customer more and more. From the hotel's perspective, what sort of lessons can we learn from that kind of customer engagement?
Well, I mean, we inevitably relied a lot on social media, and you know, putting out lovely posts once in a while to remind, and let's talk specifically about Brighton, but we could talk about the Belfry, we could talk about all other places that I've worked. But it's a great business to remind customers that it's a sunny day in Brighton, so come and stay with us again, or look at the new menu, or look at the new cocktail we've created, or we've refurbished our bedrooms. I can get the point, Tim. I think it is a bit more tricky for automotive retail, but something as simple as, you know, we've refurbished our showroom, we've got some new cars in, come and have a look. And I get quite a lot of invites, for example, to what I describe as open evenings, where, you know, get the chance to come and have a glass of wine and meet the team and talk about your car. I don't think this dealership I've just dealt with would want me to, but because they certainly wouldn't want me on the wine and then talking about it, because it hasn't been a great experience. But I just think little things like that, and that social media with automotive retail is very strong. I mean, you know, adverts on television right the way through to posts, and reminding me constantly that, you know, your new car that you had is now an old car, is quite emotionally drawing. But then make it connected, make it relevant, and make it connected. Make me feel like it's relevant to me. And I'm sure everyone's aware that you can drill down on CRMs and all sorts of things. You can drill down into customer types. So, for example, you can say, look, this bloke's 60 and he drives a Mercedes, so let's make sure that it's relevant to him, as opposed to send him the brochure for the new Mini or something like that, because I wouldn't look at that.
Yeah. So the keeping it relevant in those kind of micro moments as well, giving you excuses.
That's exactly it. I think the micro marketing is far more relevant and important than macro marketing. I think just sending out pictures of lovely cars or whatever it might be is all fine. It's a good reminder, and it invokes an emotion, but being able to demonstrate to a customer that you're really thinking about them, even though basically it's all AI and computer generated, then I think that's the way to do it.
Okay, fantastic. It's often said that from customer service perspective, customer experience perspective, the point at which they really earn their money is when something awful's happened and they have to turn that around and create that sense of delight in the customer. Have you got any examples from your hotel history of kind of where that's happened, and any advice for our audience?
I've got plenty in hotels, and it was an old boss of mine actually said to me, here's the headline rule. He said, when you think you've been generous, add some more. So for example, if a customer's had a bad stay and they stayed for one night, and you think, do you know what, it was their anniversary, we did screw it up, it wasn't great, they were meant to be in a sea view room and they ended up in an inland room because we were overbooked, or whatever it might be. Ring them personally, ring them. I absolutely objected to internet and e-communication. And then when you speak to them, say, look, I'm really sorry that things went wrong. You let them get it off their chest a bit and say, I tell you what, why don't you come back and have 2 nights, dinner, bed and breakfast on us, and we'll make sure you're properly looked after. Now I have a specific example of that, which is mind-blowingly good. And that is an ex-colleague of mine in a company way back was getting married, and she was getting married on a Caribbean island. And Virgin Airways had a delayed flight to get her to the Caribbean island for the 3-day qualifying or whatever you need to have in order for the wedding license to be legal for you to get married. So not only did she arrive late, she then missed her wedding, but they couldn't then get her in for her to then enjoy the rest of her time to be her honeymoon. So another 3 or 4 days while they were trying to rearrange the wedding. She got back to the UK and understandably she complained. And within about a fortnight, the phone rang and it was Richard Branson on the phone. And he offered her 1 week, all inclusive in any of his resorts she would choose to go to. But Richard Branson made that phone call. Not bad.
Yeah.
And it goes to another whinge as well as a positive of mine. And that was that quite often, sadly, a complaint flows downhill. I won't use the S word, but a complaint flows downhill and it ends up with perhaps a more junior person than it should. And my view is, if you're the boss, you're getting the benefit from the business, so take the problems when they come your way as well, and pick the phone up yourself and speak to the customer. Because there is nothing more irritating, I find, as a customer than getting a phone call from someone to whom the problem has been delegated. Possibly they don't actually really understand what the problem was in the first place, so you then have to go back over it all again.
Yeah.
And the boss is probably, you know, playing golf or something. It's very, very, very annoying.
And the last thing as an aggrieved customer you want is that back and forth of them having to go to somebody more with the authority to approve things. So
yeah, it goes back and forth, the problem escalates, normally costs you more in the long run anyway, but we all know the old adage that, you know, make a person happy and they'll tell a friend, and make someone unhappy and they'll tell 10. So just, you know, get it sorted.
Absolutely. No, I'm really interested in your management meeting agenda turnaround. I think very, very interesting on that.
You're going to do it?
I think we should. I think we absolutely should. I'm interested in how leadership behaviours that you've seen in the hotel industry, how can they kind of, what have you seen? What do you expect people to demonstrate, and how can the automotive sector kind of learn from that?
Well, I've always been a believer that the leader should be present, they should be front-facing, connected to their teams, connected to their customers, charismatic, well presented, etc., etc., etc. I mean, I've dressed down for today because I used to wear all sorts of ridiculous ties and goodness knows what, but always looking fantastic, and that sets the standard. But the customer sees it, but the staff see it too. But I think that being present is probably the number one thing that a manager can do. Strange enough, we didn't used to wear name badges or anything as managers, and the staff didn't either, but we didn't wear name badges at the Grand. But I was a believer that if I had a good management team, my managers would walk around amongst the customers and they would look and go, I reckon that's one of the management team. And I think that's really, really important. And again, while I'm having my whinge, you know, my most recent car buying experience was, it all went a bit horribly wrong at the final negotiated price, because I was told something on Friday that then wasn't the same when I went back on Saturday, and I got quite annoyed about that. But there was this bloke in a glass box at the back of the showroom who the guy who was dealing me with kept going to see. And I realised eventually that the guy in the glass box was the manager. And it took 3 goes for my sales colleague to go and speak to him before I said, just before I get really upset, ask him to come and join us. And he did, and you can imagine I was more than a little upset about the whole
Steam
thing.
coming out your ears.
Yeah, it was, yeah. And sarcastic and all the normal customer traits. And went, oh wow, thanks very much for joining us. I didn't realise you were so important that I didn't exist, or something like that. But it just totally wound me up. And there was a difference in the price, by the way, between what I thought and what they thought, 500 quid. But it was a principle of 500 quid to me. And when they went off to have one last chinwag, I said to Julia, my partner, I said, look, do you know what? If we get halfway, let's agree it. I thought it was the lower of the two. And he came back and went, okay, we'll do the deal for you at the lower of the two. I said, oh, right, great. And I walked away in my mind 250 quid better off. If he hadn't annoyed me like that, I probably would have said to the salesperson, tell you what, let's go at 28,250 or whatever it is, and we'll do the deal.
Yeah.
Silly.
Very much.
250 quid to the profit.
Very much so,
Yeah.
absolutely. Just any questions from the audience before we? No? So I'm interested, Andrew, in hearing, do you have any automotive related stories from your hotel industry? Either, I mean, guests turn up to your hotels either being chauffeured or driving their own cars, and in terms of valet parking, that sort of thing.
Well,
I'm sure there's been There's been a
Yeah.
few.
To speak ill of the dead wouldn't be very fair, but there was a very famous golf commentator called Peter Allis that would insist on driving his Rolls-Royce into the disabled bay right by the front door of the Belfry, and if he didn't get that space, he kicked off. But he had no disabilities, so God rest his soul. He was quite a tricky guy. But his Rolls-Royce was far more important than a disabled person's car parking space. But the one that really comes to mind when anyone ever asks me about cars and hotels is that a guest arrived once to the Grand in a 1960-something Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost Mark II. Basically the white version of the one that the Queen used to go round in, you know, the massive great Rolls-Royce. And he arrived there, and the concierge looked at it and sort of argued amongst themselves who was going to park it this time, because none of them wanted to do it. This thing was literally like a tank. Anyway, it was parked up in the garage, and I'm in my office, and I get a phone call from one of my managers to say, I think you better come down, Andrew, because there's been a problem. Now, in my world of hotels, there were problems and they've sorted it. Then there was a problem, but you need to help us sort it. And then there was a problem and you need to come because it's that big a problem. You actually need to be here for this. So I went downstairs and they said, there's been a bit of a problem in the garage. I said, oh yeah. And basically this thing was such a tank that the concierge had popped it in reverse to try and get it into a car parking space. The clutch had slipped a bit and he'd run it straight into the coffee machine repairman's Vauxhall Astra. And the Astra wasn't in great shape, but the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost or Phantom was in really bad shape, and it was basically caved in right across the rear of the car at 45 degrees. So I rang the customer in his room and I said, hello, Mr. Smith. There's been a bit of a problem that we just need to chat through with you. He was a very eloquent, well-spoken chap. He was the type that wore a cravat and a boater indoors at all times. He was that type of gentleman. And he came and he said, well, what is the problem? And I said, well, if you could come downstairs and we can chat it through. So he came down. I said, would you accompany me through to the garage? And we went through and I said, I'm very sorry, but as you can see, there's been an incident with your car. Oh, yes. Yes, I can see the problem now, he said. I said, well, don't worry. We're going to do all we can to sort it out. And there are various options. One is we'll get it repaired for you. Two is you can send us a quote and then we'll get it repaired for you. Or three, we'll get it taken away for you and you can get it repaired. But either way, we'll sort it out. And he turned round to me and we were in the lobby at this point. And he said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going back to my suite. I'm going to shut my eyes and I'm going to pretend none of this happened. And I said, well, it has happened. It was a great big 45-degree dent across your Rolls-Royce Silver Phantom, at which point he pressed the lift button, got in it, disappeared, and we literally never saw him again. Never saw him again. He just checked out the next morning.
Wow.
A few days later, some bloke with a flatbed lorry turned up at the Grand. Said, hello mate, I'm here to pick up a car. I think I know the one you mean. I think it's a Rolls-Royce Silver Phantom. Oh, that's the one, yeah. This thing went on this flatbed lorry and off it went. And then about 8 weeks after that, a bill for £28,000 landed on my desk. And we just paid it. We just paid it.
Wow.
We cocked up, we messed up. Wasn't his fault.
Yeah.
Take your medicine.
Wow.
But yeah, that's in the book, that one.
Yeah.
That's in the book. We had the Cannonball Run come to the hotel and they were absolute
really?
crazy cokeheads. It was just bonkers in their fast cars. It was all good stuff, you know. Yeah. Anyway, all good, automotive, we love it.
I imagine your goodwill budget generally doesn't run to kind of repairing Rolls Royces, but you have to make the exceptions.
You just take your medicine.
Yeah.
And you know what? It lasts a long time in the minds of customers that you've done them right, I think.
Absolutely.
Good luck to all of you when you've got such a high price commodity on your hands as a brand new car.
Fantastic. Lovely. Thank you very much, Andrew. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Mosley.
Thanks for coming.